The sound of tires screeching echoed through the empty street, as a small, scruffy dog lay abandoned, its body trembling in fear. Once a happy companion to a loving family, now it was left to fend for itself. The dog, with its fur matted and eyes wide with confusion, had been thrown out of a car in the dead of night, left to survive on the cold, unforgiving streets. It howled in pain, a pitiful cry that cut through the silence. The dog had known love once, but now it faced the harsh reality of a world that had forgotten it. It limped, dragging itself away from the road, searching for any sign of kindness. But the world was indifferent, and the dog's hope began to fade with every step. Why? It seemed to ask, the pain of betrayal heavy in its heart. But this was not the end. There was something more waiting for this dog, something that would change everything. Sarah had just finished another long day at work when she noticed something strange. There, lying in the middle of the sidewalk in front of her apartment building, was a small, scruffy dog. Its fur was matted, its body thin, and its eyes carried a look of deep sadness. For a moment, Sarah hesitated, unsure of what to do. She didn't know the first thing about caring for a stray, but something in the dog's eyes tugged at her heart. "Hey there," Sarah whispered, her voice soft and warm. The dog's eyes flicked toward her, and for the first time that night, there was a glimmer of recognition. Slowly, it began to stand up, its legs shaky and unsure. Sarah took a step closer, bending down slightly, trying to make herself appear less intimidating. "You're safe now," she said softly. "I won't hurt you." And with that, Sarah extended a hand toward the scared animal, ready to take the first step in an unexpected, life-changing journey. The following days were full of uncertainty for both Sarah and the dog. She had brought the dog into her home, giving him food and water, but he was still scared, hiding under the couch or in dark corners when she tried to approach. It seemed like he had been abandoned by someone he trusted, and now he couldn't bring himself to trust anyone again. Sarah knew this wasn't going to be easy, but she was determined. "It's okay," she whispered one evening as she sat on the floor, patiently waiting for him to come out. "You're safe now." The dog's eyes flickered in her direction, but he remained still. Sarah's heart ached. She couldn't imagine what he had gone through. But she knew that, step by step, they would both learn to heal. And maybe, just maybe, he would learn to trust again. The road ahead was unclear, but Sarah wasn't backing down. She had already made a choice, to help him. And she would. A week passed, and there were small signs of progress. The dog, whom Sarah had named Max, was still cautious, but he no longer immediately ran away when she entered the room. He would watch her from a distance, his eyes slowly softening as he observed her movements. One morning, Sarah woke up to find Max lying near the door, his body relaxed and no longer tense. She stood still, hoping not to startle him, and took a few steps toward him. To her surprise, Max didn't retreat. Instead, he sat up and let her come closer. "I think you're starting to trust me," Sarah said softly, smiling. Max's tail wagged gently, and for the first time, Sarah felt a sense of hope. This small, silent gesture was a breakthrough, a moment that told her that the journey of healing for both of them had begun. One evening, as Sarah was preparing dinner, she heard a noise from the hallway. Turning, she saw Max standing at the edge of the living room, his eyes fixed on her. He had followed her for the first time, something he had never done before. Sarah stopped in her tracks, her heart racing. This was a huge step, a sign that Max was starting to feel more secure. She slowly approached him, not wanting to rush. Max didn't move, but his eyes softened. As Sarah reached out to pet him, Max didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned into her touch, his tail wagging softly. "You're okay now," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. "I promise I won't leave you." Max closed his eyes, content in her presence. It was a quiet moment, but it meant everything. In that simple exchange, Sarah knew that they had made a real connection, a bond that couldn't easily be broken. As the days went on, Sarah and Max grew closer, but the road to trust was not without setback. Max would often retreat into corners when Sarah wasn't looking, and there were moments when his fear took over, making him cower and shake at sudden movements. One evening, Sarah tried to coax him out from under the couch with his favorite treat, but Max wouldn't come. He just stared at her with fearful eyes, his body tense. "It's okay, Max," Sarah whispered gently, sitting down on the floor. "I won't hurt you. You're safe here." But Max remained frozen, the walls of fear still thick around him. Sarah's heart broke for him, but she understood this was part of his journey, and hers too. She knew that healing took time, and she had to be patient. "We'll get through this together," she said, offering a silent promise to the frightened dog. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah's persistence began to pay off, though the progress was slow. Max started to come closer when she called his name, but there was still hesitation in every step. One afternoon, Sarah was sitting at her desk working when she heard a soft rustling. She turned around and saw Max standing in the doorway of the living room, watching her. His posture was still guarded, but the distance between them had shrunk. Sarah smiled softly and leaned down, holding her hand out. "Come here, Max," she said softly. To her surprise, he took a few steps forward, his eyes never leaving her. With a gentle motion, she called him again. Slowly, Max moved closer, and for the first time in weeks, Sarah reached out and touched his head. It wasn't a full breakthrough, but it was enough. It was the first step toward something more. Max's progress, though slow, continued. He started following Sarah around the house, staying a few steps behind her, watching her every move. There were still moments when he would retreat, but something had shifted. One afternoon, as Sarah sat on the couch reading a book, Max jumped up beside her, hesitating at first, but then curling up next to her, resting his head on her lap. Sarah froze for a moment, unsure of how to react. She hadn't expected this. It was the first time Max had ever willingly sought out her touch. "Hey there, buddy," Sarah whispered, gently stroking his fur. Max's tail thumped softly against the couch. A wave of emotion washed over Sarah as she continued to pet him. This moment, so simple yet profound, felt like a turning point. Max wasn't just surviving anymore, he was learning to live again. It had been a few months since Sarah had first found Max, and while he had come a long way, the scars of his past still lingered. There were times when a loud noise or sudden movement would cause him to flinch or hide, and Sarah knew he was still haunted by the trauma he had endured. One evening, as they were sitting together on the couch, a car backfired outside. Max jumped up, barking furiously, and ran to the door, scratching at it frantically. Sarah quickly moved toward him, her voice calm but firm. "Max, it's okay, you're safe." But Max continued to bark, his eyes wide with fear. It broke Sarah's heart to see him like this, but she knew that she couldn't let him live in fear forever. She knelt down beside him, gently taking his face in her hands. "You don't have to be scared anymore," she whispered. "I'm right here." Slowly, Max stopped barking, and his body relaxed, but Sarah knew the journey wasn't over. He still had more healing to do. The healing journey continued for Max, and for Sarah as well. One day, while walking through the park, Max suddenly stopped, his tail wagging as he sniffed the ground. Sarah looked down at him, a smile tugging at her lips. "What is it, Max?" she asked. As if in answer, Max began to pull her gently toward a small group of children playing with a ball. The sight of them made Sarah's heart swell. She had been afraid that Max's past would prevent him from ever enjoying life again. But here he was, showing interest in something new. Sarah allowed him to approach the children, who immediately crouched down, offering him a ball to play with. Max hesitated at first, but soon he was chasing after the ball, his tail wagging with joy. Sarah watched him, feeling a quiet pride and happiness. Max wasn't just learning to trust her, he was learning to trust the world again. Max's transformation continued to unfold, but the road ahead was still filled with challenges. One afternoon, Sarah was having a quiet cup of tea in the living room, when she heard a faint whimper. She looked over to see Max standing in the corner, his eyes wide with uncertainty. For a moment, Sarah thought he was going to retreat, but instead, Max took a tentative step toward her. His eyes locked with hers, and something shifted in that brief moment. The same fear, but now mixed with a glimmer of hope. Sarah stood up slowly, her heart racing. "Max, it's okay," she said softly, taking a small step toward him. To her surprise, Max walked up to her, nuzzling her hand as if to say, "I'm ready." The moment was small, but monumental. Sarah knelt down and gently ran her fingers through his fur. "You've come so far," she whispered. And at that moment she realized they were no longer two strangers, but partners, both learning to trust again. As the days went by, Sarah began to notice more changes in Max's style. He no longer jumped at loud sounds, and he was becoming more confident during their walks. One afternoon, they went to the park, and Max, instead of cowering at the sight of other dogs, approached them with curiosity. Sarah watched in amazement as Max greeted another dog, his tail wagging softly. The other dog, a small, friendly terrier, sniffed him cautiously before playfully wagging its tail in return. It was as if Max was discovering the joy of companionship again. "Look at you," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with pride. "You're doing it, Max." As she watched the two dogs play together, Sarah realized that Max was no longer just surviving, he was thriving. The healing wasn't just about overcoming fear. It was about rediscovering joy and connection. Max's progress seemed endless. Every day brought a new milestone, whether it was him greeting visitors without fear, playing with other dogs, or even sleeping soundly through the night. Sarah knew she had made a difference, but it was also clear that Max was changing her life as much as she had changed his. One evening, after a particularly long day, Sarah sat down on the couch, exhausted. Max jumped up beside her, his usual cautious nature now replaced with a sense of ease. He lay next to her, resting his head on her lap. "You're not just my pet, are you?" Sarah whispered, stroking his fur gently. "You've become a part of me." Max responded with a soft sigh, closing his eyes contentedly. Sarah smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. This was what she had been searching for all along. The connection, the bond, the unconditional love that Max had finally learned to trust again. One afternoon, as Sarah and Max were taking their usual walk through the neighborhood, they encountered a situation that tested everything they had worked for. A group of children were playing on the sidewalk, when one of them accidentally dropped a ball. It rolled right into the street, and before anyone could react, a car sped toward it. Max, who had always been wary of loud noises, froze for a moment. But then, to Sarah's astonishment, he bolted toward the street, his instincts taking over. With a swift movement, Max darted in front of the car, grabbing the ball in his mouth just in time and running back to the sidewalk, unharmed. The car screeched to a halt. "Max!" Sarah shouted, her heart racing. She rushed to him, dropping to her knees to check if he was okay. But Max stood there, tail wagging, looking up at her with pride. He had just saved the day. And in that moment, Sarah realized that Max wasn't just healing, he had found his purpose. He had become the hero in his own story. After Max's heroic moment, Sarah realized that she had been witnessing not just physical healing, but an emotional transformation as well. Max was no longer the fearful dog who had been abandoned. He was strong, confident, and full of life. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Sarah spoke softly to Max. "You've taught me so much, Max," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You've taught me that healing takes time, but it also takes trust. I've learned to trust you, and you've learned to trust me. We've both come a long way." Max, sitting beside her, nudged her hand with his nose, as if to say, "We're in this together." Sarah smiled and hugged him close, feeling the warmth of their connection. They had both found something that they never thought possible: hope. As Max continued to grow and heal, Sarah noticed something troubling. Occasionally, when strangers approached, Max would cower or growl, as though something about the world outside still scared him. Sarah realized that despite how far he had come, Max's past still haunted him. One afternoon, she decided it was time to face this head-on. They went to a dog park, hoping to socialize Max with other dogs. The park was bustling with activity, dogs running around and people chatting, but Max hesitated at the entrance. He looked at Sarah, uncertainty in his eyes. "You can do this," she whispered, giving him a gentle nudge. But as they stepped into the park, a sudden bark from another dog caused Max to freeze. His body stiffened, and his tail dropped. Sarah immediately knelt beside him. "It's okay, Max, we'll take it slow," she reassured him, but deep inside, she knew this moment would be crucial in his journey, for both of them. Max's initial reaction at the park showed Sarah just how much further they still had to go. But she didn't give up. Over the next few weeks, she brought Max to the park regularly, but they stayed away from the crowds. Slowly, Max began to relax around the other dogs, though he still remained wary. One day, as they walked past a group of playful dogs, Max stopped and watched them closely. Sarah held her breath, unsure of what would happen. Then, something remarkable occurred. Max started to wag his tail. It was tentative at first, but it was there, a sign that he was learning to engage with the world again. "Good boy, Max," Sarah said softly, smiling. Max, though still cautious, took a few steps forward, and for the first time, he greeted another dog without fear. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and it was enough for Sarah. While Max was making progress in the park, the outside world still presented challenges. During one of their walks through the neighborhood, they passed by a house where a man was yelling at his dog. Max's body tensed immediately, his fur bristling at the sound. He pulled on his leash, trying to get away, his breathing quick and shallow. Sarah stopped in her tracks. "Hey, Max, it's okay," she said softly, but Max wasn't listening. He was fixated on the man and his dog, his past trauma flashing before him. Sarah could feel the panic rising in Max, and for a moment she felt powerless. But then she remembered the bond they had built, the trust they had developed. She crouched down beside Max and spoke gently. "You're safe with me. I won't let anything happen to you." Slowly, Max's body relaxed, his tense muscles softening. Sarah took a deep breath, and they continued their walk, the sound of the man's yelling fading in the distance. Max had come a long way, but moments like these reminded Sarah how deeply the past could still affect him. Max's trust in Sarah continued to grow, but it wasn't just the physical progress that mattered, it was the emotional bond they shared. One evening, after a long day, Sarah sat on the couch with Max curled up beside her. She gently ran her fingers through his fur, thinking about how far they had both come. Max had taught her so much about resilience, patience, and trust. He had been broken, abandoned, and mistreated, but now he was healing, not just from physical scars, but from emotional wounds that went far deeper. Sarah thought about the first time she met him, scared, trembling, alone. And now, here he was, lying peacefully beside her. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew they would face it together. "You're not alone anymore, Max," Sarah whispered. "I'll always be here for you." One afternoon, Sarah received a call from a local animal rescue organization. They had learned about Max's journey and wanted to feature his story in an upcoming event to raise awareness about abandoned pets. Sarah was hesitant at first, unsure of how Max would react to being in the spotlight. But after some thought, she realized this could be an opportunity for Max to continue his healing, to show others how far he had come. Together they attended the event where Sarah shared Max's story with the crowd. Max was nervous at first, but when Sarah sat beside him, he leaned into her, finding comfort in her presence. The crowd responded with warmth and applause, recognizing Max's strength and resilience. As Sarah looked down at Max, who was now standing tall, she realized that his story wasn't just about survival. It was about the power of love, healing, and hope. Max had truly found his voice, and Sarah knew that together they would continue to inspire others. Sarah had always known that Max's healing would not be a simple journey, but she never expected to face the challenge that was about to come. One evening, as they were walking through the neighborhood, a familiar face appeared at the end of the street. It was Sarah's old neighbor, who had always been dismissive of Max's past, calling him just a stray. He approached them, his eyes narrowed in disapproval. Max immediately tensed, sensing the tension in the air. "You still have that dog?" he asked, his tone condescending. Sarah felt a wave of protectiveness rise inside her. Max, who had come so far, was still easily affected by the harshness of the world. "Yes, I do," Sarah said firmly. "And he's not just a stray, he's a survivor." Max growled softly, the once quiet dog now standing tall beside Sarah. The moment was a test, not just of Max's healing, but of Sarah's commitment to defend him no matter what. She wasn't going to let anyone diminish the progress they had made. Max had found his place, and no one would take that from him. The encounter with Sarah's old neighbor left a lingering heaviness in the air. Max, once so timid and fearful, had become protective, standing his ground beside Sarah. It was a moment of unexpected pride for her, but also a reminder of how much he still had to work through. As the days passed, Max seemed more on edge, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a constant vigilance. Sarah knew the world could be cruel, but she also knew that Max had been through too much to let anyone, even those who didn't understand him, take away the peace he had found. So, she made a decision. It was time for Max to face the world beyond the confines of their neighborhood. They would go on a trip, a new beginning, away from the people who had once hurt him. Sarah believed that this fresh start would allow Max to continue his healing journey, without the shadows of the past lingering over him. "We're in this together, Max," she whispered one night, as he curled up beside her. "Let's start over." The trip was everything Sarah had hoped for. Max, for the first time, seemed to fully embrace the change. They spent the days exploring new places, parks, beaches, and even forests. Sarah could see how the new environment was helping Max grow. He wasn't constantly looking over his shoulder anymore. He played with other dogs, ran freely through the fields, and even approached strangers with an open heart. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One afternoon, while they were sitting by a lake, Max lay beside Sarah, watching the world around him. "You're amazing," Sarah whispered, her heart full of emotion. Max had come so far, from being abandoned and fearful to this, a dog who had learned to trust again, to love again, and to live. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah realized that this trip wasn't just about giving Max a fresh start. It was about reclaiming the hope that both of them had lost, finding peace in a world that had once been cruel to them. Together, they had found healing. The next few weeks brought Max and Sarah even closer. Max's once quiet world had expanded. He was no longer the fearful dog who flinched at loud noises or recoiled at new people. He had learned to embrace the world with a new sense of purpose. But there was still one more hurdle to overcome. During one of their walks, they came across a dog that resembled the one Max had been abandoned with in the past. Max froze in his tracks, his eyes fixed on the dog, his body rigid. For a moment, Sarah could see the old fear rising within him. She stopped, waiting for him to react. "It's okay, Max," she said softly, her hand gently resting on his back. "You don't have to be afraid." Max stayed still, his eyes locked on the dog. But then, slowly, he looked up at Sarah and relaxed his stance. The fear was still there, but Max had learned to trust his new life. He wasn't going to let the past dictate his future. Sarah smiled, a quiet pride swelling within her. Together they had conquered yet another challenge. As the weeks went by, Sarah's bond with Max deepened. She had watched him overcome fears, form new connections, and find joy again. One evening, after a long walk, they returned home. Sarah sat down on the couch, Max curled up beside her as usual. This time, instead of retreating into himself, Max rested his head on her lap, looking up at her with a soft gaze. Sarah gently scratched his ears, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "You've taught me so much, Max," she whispered. "You've taught me how to love again, how to trust again, and most of all, how to keep going no matter what." Max's tail thumped softly in response, and Sarah smiled through her tears. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had been worth it. They had found their way together, and nothing could break the bond they had formed. The months that followed brought a quiet peace to Sarah and Max. The struggles of the past seemed distant, and for a while, their lives were full of simple joys, walks in the park, lazy afternoons, and moments of calm companionship. But life, as always, had a way of throwing curveballs. One morning, Sarah received a call from a local animal shelter. There had been an emergency. A dog had been abandoned and was in critical condition. They needed help, and Sarah, despite the suddenness of it all, knew what she had to do. Max had come so far, and now it was time for him to help another dog find the same healing he had. "Max," she said softly, looking down at him, "we have work to do." As Sarah prepared to leave for the shelter, she watched Max, her loyal companion, now fully healed, as he stood by her side, ready for whatever came next. She knew this would be a test, not just of Max's healing, but of their bond. Together, they could make a difference. When Sarah arrived at the shelter, she found a small, trembling dog in one of the kennels. The dog was malnourished, with sad, hollow eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. It reminded her so much of Max when she first found him, broken, scared, alone. The shelter workers explained that the dog had been abandoned on the street, left to fend for itself in a harsh world. Sarah's heart ached. But then she remembered how far Max had come, and she realized that this was his chance to pay it forward. She knelt down beside the kennel, reaching her hand out to the scared dog. "You're not alone," she whispered softly. "I'll help you, just like someone helped me." She looked over at Max, who stood by her side, watching the dog. It was then that Sarah knew Max wasn't just a survivor. He had become a healer. Slowly, the little dog approached, and Sarah gently opened the kennel door, allowing the dog to step out. With Max by her side, they were ready to help. The little dog, named Charlie, was wary at first. He would shy away from Sarah and Max, retreating to the corners of the room. But Sarah never gave up. Day by day, she showed him patience and kindness, and slowly, Charlie began to trust her. Max, always calm and steady, seemed to know what to do. He would sit quietly by Charlie, offering a silent companionship that spoke louder than words. After a week, Charlie finally approached Max. It was a small, hesitant step, but it was enough. Max's tail wagged gently as Charlie sniffed him. Sarah watched the moment with a mixture of joy and gratitude. She had always believed that healing was about connection, and now, Max was proving it. "You're not just healing yourself, Max," Sarah whispered as she stroked his fur. "You're helping others heal too." As the days passed, Charlie began to change. He followed Max everywhere, mimicking his every movement. Max, once so fearful and alone, had become a role model for another dog who had suffered in similar ways. Sarah saw the transformation in Charlie, but it wasn't just the dog that was changing, it was Sarah too. She had always seen herself as someone who had rescued Max, but now she realized that Max had rescued her as well. Together, they had both learned the power of second chances. "We're a team, Max," Sarah said, looking down at him as they sat together on the porch. "You've shown me what it means to never give up. I think it's time to show Charlie that too." Max rested his head on her lap, his eyes closing in contentment. He had become the healer he was always meant to be. The day came when Charlie was ready for adoption, and Sarah knew that it was time for him to find his forever home. As she prepared to say goodbye, she looked down at Max, who had become a symbol of healing, hope, and resilience. "You did it, Max," she whispered. "You've given Charlie the chance you never had." Max looked up at her with trusting eyes, as if he understood the weight of her words. Sarah hugged him tightly, her heart full of gratitude. She had never imagined that she'd be able to help another dog in the way Max had helped her. But here they were, giving hope to another soul. "You've made the world a better place, Max," she said softly. "And so have I." As they watched Charlie leave with his new family, Sarah realized that the healing never truly ended. It was a continuous cycle of giving, receiving, and growing. And with Max by her side, she knew they were ready to face whatever came next. The months passed, and life with Max was as it had always been, filled with small moments of joy and shared quiet time. Sarah had found her purpose, and Max, in turn, had found his. Yet, deep down, she still feared the day when Max would face his ultimate test. That moment arrived unexpectedly, one afternoon. Sarah was on a walk with Max when they came across an old acquaintance, the man who had once abandoned him. Sarah froze as she recognized him, and Max immediately reacted, his tail stiffening and his posture tense. The man, looking disheveled and unshaven, stopped when he saw Max. His face twisted into a grimace, as if the sight of Max stirred something deep within him. "You've done well with him," the man said, his voice rough and regretful. I didn't know what I was doing back then." Max's body trembled slightly at the man's words, but he didn't back down. Sarah placed a protective hand on Max's back, her voice unwavering. "He's come a long way, and he's happy now. That's what matters." Max, despite the man's presence, stood tall beside Sarah, showing that no matter who this man was, Max was no longer defined by his past. The moment was a quiet victory, not just for Max, but for Sarah, who had fought for him every step of the way. The encounter with the man left Sarah shaken, but it also marked a turning point for both her and Max. Over the next few weeks, Sarah could see how deeply the past still affected him. Max began to withdraw at times, as if haunted by the memories of abandonment. He would hesitate before entering new places, and at night he sometimes woke with restless eyes staring into the darkness. Sarah knew the road to full healing was far from over, but she also knew that she had to be there for him, just as he had always been there for her. One evening, Sarah decided to take Max to a place he had never been before, the forest where they first found each other. The place was peaceful, quiet, and full of memories. As they walked through the trees, Sarah spoke softly to Max. "You're safe now, Max. No one can hurt you again." Max looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of trust and lingering fear. But he continued to walk beside her, the weight of his past still heavy but not enough to stop him. And Sarah knew that with each step, Max was getting closer to fully reclaiming his life. As the seasons changed, so did Max. The days of uncertainty began to fade, and Max's confidence grew. He no longer recoiled at sudden noises or shy away from new people. One afternoon, Sarah took Max to the park again, this time with a sense of purpose. It was a moment of celebration, a testament to how far they had both come. Max, running through the grass, chased after a ball. Sarah threw. His body was light, and his tail wagged with pure joy. It wasn't just the game that made him happy, it was the freedom, the sense of normalcy. He was finally living the life he had always deserved. As Sarah watched him run, she thought about everything they had been through together, the fears, the pain, the setbacks. It had all led to this moment. "Look at you," Sarah whispered, smiling. "You're finally free." The months flew by, and life with Max felt more like a dream. Max's past was no longer a shadow over his life, and his future was brighter than ever. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. "I never imagined we'd make it this far, Max," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "When I first met you, I didn't know if you would ever trust again. But look at you now. Look at us." Max, resting beside her, let out a soft sigh, his body completely at ease. Sarah gently stroked his fur, feeling the warmth of his presence. "We've both been through so much," she continued. "But we made it, didn't we?" Max nudged her hand, his eyes soft and trusting. "We're going to be okay, Max," Sarah whispered, the weight of her words sinking in. "You and me, we're going to be okay." As Sarah and Max sat together in their quiet home, she realized that their journey wasn't just about healing. It was about creating a new life, a life filled with love, trust, and possibility. "You saved me, Max," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "And now, together, we're making a difference." Max, ever the loyal companion, rested his head on her lap, his body completely relaxed. They had made it through the darkness, and now they were standing in the light. Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the bond they shared, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. Max had shown her that even the most broken parts could heal, that love could conquer fear, and that every day was a chance for a new beginning. As the night drew in, Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the quiet presence of Max beside her. Together they had found hope, not just in each other but in the world around them. And as long as they had each other, they would always find their way.